everyone, and welcome back to Bird in the Wings. I'm your host, Kelli Strickland. Today's guest is Tim Josephs. He is the artistic director at the Northeast Wisconsin Dance Organization. He's also a ballet instructor on faculty in the Department of Theater and Dance here at UW Green Bay, where the Weidner Center is located. And I have gotten to know Tim just a little bit better over the last few months as we have started working on plans for the Northeast Wisconsin Dance Organization's production of Nutcracker to move to the Weidner Center and have the Weidner Philharmonic play live orchestral music, which is incredibly exciting. It really just brings kind of a lush and a richer experience to what was already an excellent Green Bay holiday tradition. So I invited Tim to come in and talk to me a little bit, as we do on Bird in the Wings, about his artistic process, about his backstory. He's an interesting guy, and I've spoken to some artists on this podcast who display kind of a singular vision and focus on a particular form and really mastering that form. While Tim is a highly accomplished choreographer and has had a long career in dance, he also has this really rich life as a painter, as a visual artist. And it was interesting to hear him talk about how there are really no kind of lines between his artistic pursuits. That is, they all seem of a piece. I commented during our conversation that he seems driven, yes, by a compulsion to express, which I think comes up a lot on this podcast, but also just he strikes me as sort of a seeker, pursuing his curiosities, and that is just, I think, such a beautiful way of moving through life, especially in artistic life. And I think I have a lot of I envy folks who are able to kind of maintain that pure sense of curiosity and don't let themselves get maybe distracted by predetermined outcomes. It's, as you will hear, led to a really interesting life. So here it comes. This is my conversation with Tim Josephs, artistic director of Northeast Wisconsin Dance Organization and choreographer for the Nutcracker that will be coming to the Weidner Center and presented with the Weidner Philharmonic. So one of the things that we love to talk about on this podcast, and I think what I joke all the time that I started this podcast to make friends. But kind of the central question is around talking to creatives and artists who live in the region and make their work here. And how place impacts creative work is something that it's just interesting to me. And I think, historically, we have had an ecosystem where people had to go to major urban centers to earn a living through their craft. And then there were, people who didn't live in those urban centers and often combined education with their craft. But thinking about artistic process, creative gratification, all of the things that kind of attract you to the arts in the first place, how you stay connected, if you find fulfillment and enjoyment in all forms, or if you find different fulfillment and gratification. I had this wonderful conversation with Jim Rivet a few summers ago, and he was talking about how the work that he did with Chrome had a certain gratification, that there was artistic satisfaction in working with a client where you were meeting a client's expectations, but then he also had art that he made that was really just for him. It was not intended for anyone. So that's kind of the overarching conversation. And then I ask a little bit about like biographical background and things like that. Okay?
Okay, I'll answer your question.
All right.
I'm not used to talking about myself. I'll do my best.
That makes you a perfect interview. The rare find. So are you originally from the area?
I grew up in Appleton.
You did?
And then I went to school at UWGB and then moved on to North Carolina School for the Arts, where I studied ballet.
A very prestigious school.
From there, I went to Holland to study, and then I ended up coming back here, and I've been here ever since.
What took you to Holland?
I've always my career has been between the visual arts and performing arts, and my undergraduate degree is in philosophy and visual arts. And so I wanted to study painting, study the paintings of Rembrandt and Vermeer. And so I figured what better way to do that than to go and live near the museums that house so many of these works. And so I would go to the museums during the day and come to my little apartment, or my little room, I should say, at night, and paint through the night. And then I did go to school there, though, too. I was there for a total of 3 years, and one of the years I did go to a school and studied art there.
Do you still have those paintings? Any of those paintings?
Some of them. I disown a lot of my old work. There's a few pieces I'm happy with through the years, but I do have some things around. I've changed a lot, though, in terms of the visual and painting, and that with back then like Rembrandt and Vermeer, and my paintings tended to be sort of in that vein. And now it's much different.
Yeah. So you were, as all young artists, I think, as they're finding their own voice, there is value in trying to master a certain style that moves you or inspires you. And then over time, as you have life experiences and form your own opinions and thoughts about the world, it kind of informs what scratches that itch. So are any of those paintings, I'm so curious because I'm not a visual artist. I actually started, my COVID hobby that I took up was drawing. I started taking online drawing classes. But do you, those paintings specifically, I'm just curious. Are they hung in your home? Do you?
I did a lot of self-portraits, like Rembrandt did. And so my mother always got those. And so they would immediately go to her basement where all my artwork was. And when she passed away, I, again, picked it all up. And it's sitting around my studio somewhere, most of it just stacked up somewhere.
Okay.
There are a few little pieces that I still have hanging up that I painted back in that time. If you come by to see rehearsal, the back part of the studio is an art gallery, actually. And so you can see my work that I'm working on now and other stuff that's back there.
Tim, I had no idea. How interesting. So can you think back as, a kid in Appleton a few decades ago?
Mm-hmm. Many decades.
Can you think about, what were the influences that even led you to understand that you had an interest, a talent in self-expression in this way?
I really don't know. As a young student, sixth grader, fifth grader, and so on, I wrote a lot of plays, and always got the starring role in the play too, and I wrote a lot of poetry, and I don't know why I did or what led me to that. I never thought of myself as being artistically inclined as a child. I had a few bad instances or moments with some teachers with respect to those two things, and I pretty much washed my hands of all the creative arts and just stayed with sports, which was the biggest part of my past. My youth basically is playing baseball, soccer, and gymnastics, that sort of thing. And so I didn't really come back to the arts until I was in college. I started as a physics major and quickly turned to a philosophy major. And then I was curious because there was my favorite class I ever had was called Philosophy of Art. I was wondering why all these guys are sitting around talking about art. What do they really know about it? That they're just, talking about what an artist is thinking and feeling. So I figured I better take an art class. And there were some fantastic art teachers here at UWG back in the 70s and early 70s. And I took a painting class, and that was it. I mean, I knew I had to make things.
That compulsion, like you had a compulsion to create.
I knew by then already, after about 2 years, I wasn't going to be a great philosopher. And so I was very fortunate to find, something that I really loved, and that was painting. And that eventually led to dance too. So
I felt just like a little flash of fury, like spark up hearing about those elementary school teachers that didn't have the ability to kind of appreciate or cultivate a love of the arts in you. I think about, and not that there's nothing wrong with sports. I think, my mother probably would have been much happier through my middle school, high school years if I did have any athletic ability, because it just made more sense to her than what I was doing. She's highly supportive and always has been of my career. But that's a path that I think makes more sense to people. It feels more accessible. Everyone sort of identifies the values and says like teamwork, physical wellness is good, all of these things. But when I think about kids who demonstrate an interest and an appetite for creative expression that doesn't find that support in schools, it's always really heartbreaking to me.
Yeah, it was sad in a way. I mean, the one with poetry was I wrote this poem, and it was one of the class assignments for English class, and I remember going to the library in downtown Appleton and studying and working on it, and the teacher sent it off to all these competitions and so on, and all was fine. And then next assignment, or half a year later or whatever, I wrote another poem, and it was really bad. It was so bad that she said she accused me of plagiarizing the first one, which wasn't the case. I didn't plagiarize it, but it just sort of squashed the desire to do it. So,
well, that's a slightly different story. That's so interesting. So she actually was supportive of the talent that she saw,
sure.
But
and as an artist, I know I've made some bad art along the way.
It's impossible if you're making art. Yeah, there's no way you've avoided ever making bad.
I try to keep that in mind as, when I work with children.
Yeah.
So I'm careful, how you criticize them and so on. And again, in teaching ballet, that's an integral part of it all is critiquing the dancer. But it's important how you do it, I think.
The path that you describe is a real, it's a Renaissance kind of curiosity, that you would encounter something that engaged you and then had this kind of inner curiosity that then, drove you to take the art class, right? I find this interesting and engaging, but I want to understand it more fully. So I'll explore this aspect of it. Have you always been that way?
I don't know. With sports too, I guess I went from one thing to another and enjoyed them all fully. So I've been curious. Yeah, I'd have to say. So I'm glad that I wasn't set on something at age 5, and that's all I did. And even going to college, like I said, I started as a physics major and quickly changed to philosophy, and that turned into visual arts, and that turned into dance.
Yeah. It's interesting because some of the folks that I've spoken to on the podcast, not all, certainly, but some describe a path that is maybe what you're alluding to, setting on something when you're 5, but that really kind of focused, driven. We often associate it with classical musicians. I think that the kind of just laser-like focus and that discipline to sit in a practice room for 6 hours a day and honing the craft that way. But there's another kind of, there's another path to art that is not quite so discipline specific, that really is just about the the mode of expression, and no particular mode feeling better or more important, or that there's something really freeing in the way you have given yourself permission to explore all of these art forms.
Well, I'm not sure what to say to that. I certainly, even like with the visual arts, I mean, oil painting is what I enjoy the most, but wonderful sculpture teacher here at UWGB and did a lot of bronze work. Ended up actually doing my graduate work as a printmaker and enjoyed etching. I don't do either of those anymore because I don't have the opportunity to with a foundry or a printing press. But so even in the visual arts, I've moved around a lot. I stayed away from two things that I like and collect, and one is ceramics because I knew I would get overwhelmed by it and carried away by it.
How do you mean that?
I would do too much of it instead of painting or something. And the same with watercolors. I had a class in watercolors and I enjoyed it, but I stayed away because I knew I wanted to do bronze, I wanted to do painting, I wanted to do printmaking.
So you have actually set some kind of some limitations on where you focus your energy, even though you are clearly a multidisciplinary artist.
Yeah. It's led to a great ceramics collection. I've got a wonderful collection of art.
So you just focus your appreciation and love of it in a different way, which is...
I buy it.
Yeah, I buy it. So can we talk about, what when you decided to come back to Northeast Wisconsin and how Northeast Wisconsin Dance Organization came to be? What was that period of time when you were trying to sort of find the path for yourself here as opposed to living the life of Rembrandt in Holland?
Well, those are two really different questions of why I came back and the one about the Northeast Wisconsin Dance Organization. I came back from Holland. The last time I was there was in 1980. I came back here to study with the sculpture teacher here, Tom Tosh, brilliant sculptor and teacher. And when I lived in Holland, I continued to dance when I was there. And I lived next to where a very famous company there worked in the Linz Dance Theater, and I watched the rehearsals and every performance they had. And even though I had moved away from dance when I went to Holland, I was falling back into it pretty quickly. And then when I returned in 1981, I danced here for I was in some performances here for the dance teacher that was here at the time. Her name was Princess Morris. And started, I did my first choreography at that point. It was 1981, I think. It was the dance concert that they had that year, or maybe 82. And I did two pieces, two pas de deux, and realized that I liked that a lot more than I liked even painting. It was making something, and the whole dynamics that go into making a dance was something that really appealed to me. And so from there, well, that's a different story, though. Going back to the Northeast Wisconsin Dance Organization, the way that came about was that was actually a community, a nonprofit organization that was formed in 1973 by a group of parents of children who danced with the Makarov School of Ballet in Appleton and the university students who danced with Nikolai Makarov, who was the dance teacher out here in 1973. And the first production actually at the University Theater was a production of a ballet called Pandora, which was a joint Northeast Wisconsin Dance Organization and UWGB production. And that was my first performance too. I had was on my way after that to North Carolina, but I'd been studied with Makarovs, and so that was the beginning of the Northeast Wisconsin Dance Organization.
So I don't, this is my bad for not having done sufficient research ahead of this conversation. In my mind, I guess I always thought you were like the founding artistic director of NEWDO.
No, not at all.
But it not only did it pre-exist your involvement, but it was your first public performance as a dancer. Is that the case?
Correct. It was. And somewhere somebody sent a picture to me not too long ago. It was a little kind of a review and a photograph of the Press Gazette that had covered it, and I'd never seen it before, but that reminded me of the opening and the theater there, and actually that's when the studio opened up too that year. Before that, my first dance class was actually I think it's called the Garden Cafe now. It's way down the hallway. And it used to have purple, I think it was purple shag carpet, this thick carpet.
On campus over in the tunnels.
Yes.
I know what you're talking about.
That's where the first dance studio was. And so the first dance class that I took with Nick Makaroff were on shag carpet in the garden cafeteria.
That's make and do.
And then the studio opened up that year, but that was the beginning of NEWDO. And do you want me to go on with the history of NEWDO?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, that was the start of it. It was a group of parents formed a nonprofit organization to help support the mission of providing, professionally produced ballets and that sort of thing. Then it sort of sat dormant for a number of years through the 80s, early 80s. And in 1986, a group of us formed a company called Wisconsin Ballet Theater with a mission to turn it into a professional company. And by the fourth year, we indeed did have 12 professional dancers that were here 7 months out of the year. Mm-hmm. And I got a call one day about the organization. This was, again, separate. Wisconsin Ballet Theater was a different nonprofit, but somebody had said, we've still got the paperwork for the Northeast Wisconsin Dance Organization. Would you like to take it over? And so our organization did, and we actually used it sort of like as a guild for Wisconsin Ballet Theater. Mm-hmm. And then the company itself folded in 1992, but we kept the Northeast Wisconsin Dance Organization active, and eventually turned it into a performing, organization again, where we had our first concerts in the 90s were at the West De Pere High School. Mm-hmm. West De Pere High School, and we started off by doing a production of a ballet called Clara's Mirror. It was sort of a take on the Nutcracker, where Clara was 100 years old, and sort of these were her memories and dreams of her past. And so it was kind of a sometimes silly recollection of the Nutcracker. But we weren't in any position to stage a Nutcracker or anything like that. But that was a nice little full-length ballet that we did. And then we started doing 2 concerts a year in the mid-90s, where we would do a mixed repertoire of dances. And that slowly built. We talked about trying to do a Nutcracker. There were a couple of different attempts to make one happen. Eventually, with a very small board of directors, we said, well, let's just get the choreography out of the way for 2 of the big parts, the snow scene and the flower scene in Act 2. And so we made costumes for the snow scene. We got a grant for the costumes for the flowers, which we still have, those costumes. Beautiful tutus that we had made down in Chicago. And so we had 2 big things out of the way, and then we finally made the effort to go ahead and try to stage a Nutcracker. And it was quite successful. It was hectic the first year for sure. We were all scrambling to get everything done, not only the choreography, but the costumes and the sets and everything. And then the next year we added an extra performance and added some more drops that Jeff Entwistle did for us. And from there we actually got to a point where we were doing 5 performances. And then we also would usually do a spring show too, of a mixed rep spring show. So that's sort of what's gone on with NEWDO through the years.
Yeah. Boy, that's really, I guess much like your approach to learning new disciplines or, exploring different forms, it's such a iterative evolution. Do you personally take change very easily? I wonder. Like, I'm listening to you, say like this organization and this organization, and then we tried this, and it sounds like you have this very kind of iterative, easygoing way about you, where you just sort of meet whatever's in front of you and adapt.
Well, actually, I'm pretty conservative, I think, but things happen in the art world, just like in the, like this last year, with COVID and everything.
Yeah.
And so we have to adjust as best as possible. I would love to still have that old company that we had. It was a beautiful, thing for sure.
Yeah.
But like I say, things change and things evolve. What we're doing now is fantastic. This change of this year of moving into the Weidner Center and having, the Philharmonic, providing the music. I mean, that's incredible.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that. So when you had the Wisconsin Ballet Theater, and that was 80s, 90s, it sounded like.
It was the 86 through 92.
Were you dancing with the company at that point, or were you just choreographing?
I danced, but as little as possible. I didn't like having to choreograph and having to be in the ballet too. Probably the only reason I did dance in some of the pieces was because there was never a lot of guys.
Yeah.
And some of my favorite thing to choreograph back then was the pas de deux. Or couples dancing together. And but I liked choreographing, put it that way.
Yeah.
That was my interest in it all.
That's interesting so when you went to North Carolina, what was your focus at that point? What were you intending to study?
I went to study ballet.
It was ballet.
Yeah.
And the visual arts discovery, well, you'd already kind of made it, right, because of your instructors here. So it was already in the mix for you. And then when you finished at North Carolina, that was what pulled you. You were drawn to the idea of pursuing the visual arts.
I decided to leave there and leave North Carolina, and I went straight from there to Holland.
I see.
And then came back to North Carolina for a bit, and then moved back up here to school, and then moved back to Holland, and then moved back here.
What was the experience leaving here as a young adult to go to North Carolina? What was that environment like? That school has such a reputation. I'm just curious.
Well, the training was phenomenal for sure. And it was right in the thick of things at the time of what was happening. Balanchine's ballerinas, when they would retire, would go there and teach, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The faculty was incredible for sure, but there was a lot of really disturbing things about it too. I don't know if you've read the news about it lately, but it's in the news again. There's class action lawsuits against the school for what's happened back then in the 70s. So it was exciting to go into study that way. It was kind of, how do I say, disturbing, a lot of what I saw too.
Yeah. It's interesting, these, arts training grounds. I think the arts in general have been having a real reckoning, but maybe not like any other culture culture period is having a major reckoning right now, isn't it? But, certainly I experienced in theater training personalities that derived a sense of power that was really at the expense of students and young people. And it's so, and also I think sometimes equating this notion that the arts live slightly outside the boundaries of, normie society and an attitude that, well, things are just different in the arts, and and it's used as a crutch, I think, to sometimes treat people poorly, abuse, all those kinds of things. And it's, I think, especially for artists who work with children and know how important it is to create an environment where children can thrive, also learn technique, but they're young people first and foremost. Like this, whatever happens in terms of their relationship to the art form, once they leave your school or your rehearsal room, they may or may not pursue a career in the arts, but it will have had a formative effect on who they are as people. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the training and education of young people in the arts.
It was a different world back then,
yeah,
for sure, than it is now.
Yeah, it was a very different world. And also just reconciling that trying to reconcile talent with sometimes personal traits that are really disappointing. That's a hard, for people are sort of looking up to accomplished artists. That can be a hard thing to reconcile.
Yeah.
So you spend a lot of your time training younger dancers. Do you feel like there's a hard line between the oil painting, for instance, and the training and choreographing for the company? Or in your world, do all of these things sort of inform one another?
Oh, for sure. As a choreographer, I've learned a lot from the history of Western art, and so my choreography has definitely been influenced by the art world.
What does that mean to you? Like, how does that, how, if you were to point to a piece that you choreographed, is there a way that you could describe that to a viewer sitting next to you? Like, this is how it shows up in this piece?
Well, I did a few pieces in the past that were based on paintings. There's a painting by Edvard Munch called Three Stages. I think it's called Three Stages of Woman. And there's three figures in it, and I did a ballet based on that. I'm just bringing it sort of to life.
So sometimes quite literally as the source of inspiration.
I did a piece 2 years ago that actually one of the young dancers from the university here performed for at the Weidner Center here.
I remember, yeah, and it was lovely.
And Warren Gertz had wrote a little article on it.
Yep.
He was curious about it, and I didn't set the piece based on looking at an Andrew Wyeth painting, but I know the painting very well, and it's etched in my mind for sure. And I probably did have part of the composition of the painting fell into the composition of the piece. Totally subconscious. I mean, I didn't intend it, but when he pointed it out, I said, "Yeah, that makes sense."
Yeah. Is there anything that you can think of that feels, you've obviously lived other places, you've had to, the scale of your life has been large. Is there anything that you associate about living and making your work here in Northeast Wisconsin that feels either the environment or the culture or the, it could be in any number of things, enables you to do in a way that you don't find other places? Or is this just home and therefore this is where you make your work?
It's a hard question to answer. It is home, and it's where I'll make my work here. I've seen some wonderful things come and go through the years, for sure. Again, in the performing arts, it was the Wisconsin Ballet Theater. It was a beautiful little company. We had Palmyra Opera Company, a wonderful professional opera company. And other organizations come and go through the years like that. I'm losing my train of thought here. It's challenging here a lot, I think. But there's good things pop up then too. I mean, when I was younger, there was my teachers here in the art world were wonderful teachers, wonderful artists. And now there's a nice young group of kids coming out that are pretty engaging as artists. I'm excited to see how they develop as they with what they're doing right now. I mean, things are happening in a way, and So I don't know, so the area it's been challenge has had its challenges for sure. I mean, it's not Northeast Wisconsin is not big in that. How do I want to say it? This is why I hate doing things live. It's I think it's shown. I mean, there's the support for the arts in Northeast Wisconsin is not the best always in terms of per capita spending on the arts and sort of thing. But then you've got pockets of, galleries like in Door County. There's tons of wonderful art. And you've got some wonderful art in Green Bay too, for sure. So it's a challenge sometimes, but it's definitely worth the fight.
Yeah.
For sure.
It strikes me. I mean, I think my question was really kind of more about you specifically, like you as a creative, but your point is well taken that, sometimes when we first began this conversation, I was talking about, often to make a living, you have to go to an urban center. That's just the reality. That's where the paid opportunity is more frequently. And one of the byproducts of that tends to be deep communities of practitioners where it kind of that energy can feed on itself. And your reference to the sustainability of arts organizations and the sustainability of an artist's livelihood here, if it feels a little up and down or not reliable, that can make it hard for an art scene to really take root, and that's certainly one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about with the Bay Area Arts and Culture Alliance about, I think that the powers that be in our community will often talk about like the creative economy because that's a buzzword that you hear in the public sector as being a good thing for economic development. And my argument is always, well, yes, the key to a vibrant creative economy, though, is not placing all of the value on things that come through our community and leave. It's about investing in the artists who are here, and it's about making the community attractive for creatives to come and make their work here. That's what creates a really vibrant creative economy. And I think that I sometimes have the sense that there's too much placed on art that comes from someplace else here, and not enough value and support given to work that is made here, because there are a lot of talented people who live here. But putting in place the sustainable system, to your point about companies that come and go, and it be feeling sort of hard to find that sustainable audience, those are the things that will really create that, the downtown vibe that everyone talks about wanting to capture and those kinds of things. But my original question, I was really thinking about, different people, I think, sort of thrive in different kinds of environments. And one of the things that has struck me since I moved here, and my husband, who is an actor, but probably more like you in the way that he can find creative expression through all kinds of disciplines. He doesn't limit himself. I tend to get hung up on like, oh, I'm not good enough to do that, or but the space. I mean, just like the amount of space that there is here is actually quite inspiring to me. The accessibility to just be able to walk down to the bay and sit by the water in that way, in kind of a quiet environment, I actually find inspiring. Like it has made me more creative, I think, than the difficulty of living in an environment where it's like, oh, I got to move the car because of street cleaning, and I can't, it's going to take me 3 hours to go to the grocery store and all of that. So I just wondered if there was something about place here that, kind of is your way in to keeping that creativity lit and fueled, I guess.
I'm not sure I understand the question yet.
That's okay. Really just thinking about, if you take inspiration from everywhere, as you said earlier, that comes to you from all kinds of places. It sounds like maybe you're just the kind of person, it doesn't matter where you are. Your radar is always up, and it always comes to you. And it's.
I enjoy the Wisconsin, Northeastern Wisconsin. I'm comfortable here with the seasons.
Yeah.
I said the art world is in the area. There's been some great things that have come and gone, and there's some great things that are on their way.
Yeah.
And I've never been uncomfortable living and working here in the arts. I would like to see more community, for sure. I've seen that come and go too, both in the performing arts world and in the visual arts world. And it's great when all of it sort of comes together. And so I've not had a desire to leave here to go and work somewhere else at all. I'm not New York bound by any means.
Yeah. My last question for you, Tim. Do you feel like your students inform your work or your evolution of like where you follow your interests or explorations, whether it's choreography or painting?
I'm sorry, again, I didn't.
Do you feel like your students inform that? Are they ever the source? Does teaching ever drive the creative expression?
Oh, for sure.
Or is it mostly the other way around?
No, definitely. I mean, as a choreographer, my students inspire me all the time, for sure. I mean, there's some of the dancers I've had and that I have currently, inspire the work that I'm, planning for the near future. And hopefully they'll stay with it because, they've been the inspiration, a big part of the inspiration for creating the piece.
Yeah.
I'm working on a ballet. Hopefully we can do it this spring, or we're looking to do a spring concert. For me, it'll be my most challenging piece ever. It's called The Annoying Ballet. It's made up of 10 different really annoying songs, the type of song that once you hear it, if I tell you it, it'll be in your head for the next 2 hours.
An earworm?
Yeah. And I've spent quite a bit of time on it already. But there's some of the dancers, not saying that they're annoying, but just the type of movement I know I'm going to do for that particular piece, the way that these dancers move is just perfect. And so the dancer inspires the choreography.
Yeah.
Often, for sure.
Okay, I said that was my last question, but now I have one more.
Sure.
Does choreography for you, what does that process look like? As you're describing this, all of a sudden I'm realizing, I wonder, does that begin with you alone somewhere with music, or?
There's a couple of different ways it can happen. Like I've done a number of pieces with the Civic Symphony of Green Bay, where they'll tell me the piece that they want to do and my interest in choreographing to it. And so then I've got the music, that's all set. That's sometimes the hardest part, is to find the music for something. And then I'll work on the ideas and the concept and the composition, that sort of thing. Sometimes there's just, a story maybe that I want to tell, libretto that's already there, and then to look for the music to go with that. So it can be both ways. The music comes first or the music comes last. The ballet I was just talking about, the concept there was to work with these fun, very knowable songs, or what's the word? Songs that everybody would have heard already, which is kind of one of the kiss of death for a choreographer. If you're going to take on, something that's really popular like Ride of the Valkyries, and you better be set to go with it because it's already etched in people's mind.
And they have expectations about what it's supposed to be. Yeah.
And so I don't know if I can pull this one off or not, but I'm going to try. But again, here is an example of I've chosen the music. I've got the concept of what I want to try to accomplish. It's not, sometimes, there's just, ballet is simply abstract. There's no story to it. There might be references to different aspects of humanity, but it's just simple movement.
Yeah. I think I made that discovery. I've referenced before, I was really fortunate to have a tremendous education, both in sort of classic forms, but also my own aesthetic and appreciation for those forms when I worked at the Kennedy Center, because I could go see something every night for free, essentially. And so I saw more dance during that time that I worked there than I had ever seen in my life. And I think for a person who doesn't have a deep, I didn't grow up going to dance. That wasn't, I had a sister who was a dancer. She got good enough to be on point, whatever that means. I knew that was a big deal. And she danced at the Nutcracker down at the Erie Crown Theater in Chicago, and we would go see her do that. But I didn't have a deep relationship to dance. But I think I did figure out after going to see many ballet concerts within a short period of time that the story ballet, and this is just personal preference, but I didn't need the story, right? I didn't need to be following any kind of narrative to feel engaged. It was really just the quality of the movement in combination with the music that was most compelling to me. And it didn't occur to me that other people felt differently, and then talking to someone who was like, oh, no, I love a story. I like to follow a character. I like to, to feel a through line. But I think that's all just people's taste.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. I've heard of people who were just totally upset when they came to a Nutcracker that there were no words. I mean, there have to be words.
Maybe those people didn't just not have a deep relationship with dance. Maybe they hadn't left the house very much.
Probably, yeah.
Well, Tim, this was lovely. I really enjoyed getting to know a little bit more about you and about NEWDO and your expansive work. And I am going to take you up on your offer to go take a peek at the paintings that are in the gallery space at NEWDO.
Definitely look forward to having you come up there. And thanks for inviting me. I've never talked this much about myself before.
You should do it more often. You're really fascinating.
I don't know about that.
Thank you, Tim. There you have it. That's my conversation with Tim Josephs, another one in the books. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next month with a new episode. Bird in the Wings is a production of Phoenix Studios at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. Phoenix Studios executive producer is Ryan Martin, and the production manager is Kate Farley. Our audio production coordinator is Bill Salek. The editor for this episode is Yanzer Lim. Our graphic designer is Kimberly Vlias. And our music was written and performed by Noah Simon. If you haven't already, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platforms. You can also head over to our website at uwgb.edu/podcasts, plural, to check out past episodes of this and all of our shows. I'm your host, Kelli Strickland. Thanks for listening.